Welcome. I'm John Niemeyer with Exit Realty Northstar, and I'm here with Brian Arnold. Brian has quite a bit of experience as an assessor. Been doing assessor work for 25 years. He's been in quite a few different county offices, and currently he has his own business, Basis Solutions, where he works as a contractor and helps assessor's office with problems and things like that. But he's agreed to join us today, and so we're filming this the middle of March 2023, and 1st of April the assessor's office is going to mail out the revaluation notices to property owners in their counties. And the property owners are probably going to be a little shocked when they see their new valuations. If you haven't paid attention to what's happened in the real estate market in the last couple of years, the values went way up. Market values did. Sale prices have gone through the roof, and consequently the market values for your home have gone up, and that's going to be reflected in your county assessor's valuation of your property. To help you when you get that notice to not faint or fall over, we're going to kind of walk you through how that valuation came about, and if there is a reason that you need to protest it, the right way to do it, and the correct steps. So with all that being said, I got some questions for Brian, and I think it's always helpful to know kind of the backstory. So the assessor's office, what is the exact purpose or the job for the assessor?
Quite simply, the assessor's office, the main function of the assessor office is to value, list all of the real estate within the county. So in addition to that, assessors are in charge of classifying property. Currently we have 4 classifications of real estate in the state of Iowa: residential, agricultural, commercial, and industrial. And they also determine if a property is taxable or exempt from taxation. But they're also in charge of taking homestead applications, military credits, family farm credits, things of that nature. But the main objective of the assessor office is to correctly list and value all the real estate within an assessing jurisdiction. Got it.
And that valuation should be the current market valuation, as if it was being sold.
Correct, with the exception of agricultural land, which actually is not valued at market value. It's based on a productivity basis. So the state of Iowa really calculates that agricultural land value, but every other class of property, the goal is to have that property assessed for its market value, or what it would sell for in the open market.
When those valuations come out and everyone opens the envelope, that's what they should see, is the value of the property as if you were trying to sell it that. Actually, it's on January 1st of 23, correct?
The assessment, the actual date of assessment is January 1st, 2023. So the assessor is going to look, and the state of Iowa as well, I'm sure we'll get into later, they're going to look at all the sales that occurred during the calendar year 2022 when setting your valuation for January 1st, 2023.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that. So just how do you come up with that valuation? You kind of alluded to it, but let's walk through that.
Okay. Well, the assessor office, again, they're going to look at sales data. So at a time like the last couple years that we've had in the real estate market, property selling for a lot more than it was assessed for. So what they do is they look at ratios. They look at the relationship between the assessed value and the sale prices. And then in the market like we have in today's market, they're going to trend the values of real estate up. Because as we've seen, in addition to other inflation in other parts of the economy, real estate has really taken off as an asset, and it's really increased in value over the last 2 years.
So you don't just make up things. You're actually looking at actual sale prices of homes that sold, and then adjusting properties as if they were for sale.
Correct. So assessor's office do things a little bit different than, say, like a bank would. A bank, if most homeowners, they've had their house financed for like a purchase or refinancing transaction, and a private appraiser for a bank will pick out between 3 and 6 comparable properties to compare to your individual property and make adjustments. The assessor office, what they do is what's called mass appraisal. So what they're going to do is they're going to completely list and identify all of the characteristics of a property. How much basement finish you have, could be as detailed as appliances, although all assessors don't do that. And then what they're going to do is they're going to, it's a cost basis. Really what they're doing is calculating a cost to reproduce your home or to replace it. And then they apply a depreciation typically based on the age. So they're comparing that valuation to what the property sell for. And what they do is they adjust that cost basis based on what the properties are selling for. So they're going to make adjustments to either their depreciation tables, or they also have like map area factors for influences in certain areas, because properties, obviously, they sell for more or less in different areas.
So the assessor's office, is there anyone that checks your work?
Absolutely. So the Department of Revenue at the state of Iowa, they're the ones would give, they give the assessor office their report card. So what they do is they look every 2 years in an odd numbered year. So they're on a 2-year, what's called equalization cycle. So they give each assessor a report card every 2 years. And what they do is they're going to look at all the sales that occurred in the county, and they're going to look at what's the median sale ratio. What's the median ratio between the sale prices and the assessed values, and then they're going to give you your report card. With the increases in the market value over the last 2 years, I'm working in several different assessing jurisdictions. Most assessing offices are in the low 80 percentile. So that means to be in compliance with the state every 2 years, they need to be within 95 to 105%. So the way the state develops that is they look at your median ratio, and then they look also at your total valuation for a class of properties. So for instance, residential, they're going to do your sales ratio is 80%. They're going to look at your total valuation and figure out a dollar amount they have to increase your assessment to get within 95 to 105%. So it's really pretty much spelled out for the assessor what they have to do. And in fact, in some instances where the assessment doesn't get done in a jurisdiction for any particular reason, the state will actually order either an increase or a decrease at the end of the equalization period, which occurs in October.
Okay.
So if the assessor doesn't do their job, it still gets done. The state will send an order directly to a county auditor and order them to either increase or decrease the values if assessing office isn't in compliance with their standards.
The assessed values then are used to determine your property taxes that a property owner pays. How does that work?
So the way the assessed value, plays into your property taxes is it's the very first step. The assessor will go out and do a reappraisal, based on this market sales information, and then they send out notices to everybody. Then everyone has an opportunity to come in and protest those valuations. And then in an equalization year like we are now, the state's going to gather all the assessed values from all the jurisdictions in the entire state. They're going to add all of that valuation together. Now here in Iowa, for residential property, we have a limit of 3%. So if properties increase by more than 3%, we have another factor in your property tax calculation, which is called the rollback. So when properties increase by more than 3%, the percentage that you pay on will go down. So currently, residential properties paying on about 56% of their assessed value, and if property values increase more than 3% statewide, like we're expecting, then the amount that you actually pay on as a percentage will go down.
I see. So there is an adjustment.
There is an adjustment. And then from there, after the state calculates the rollback, the county auditor is going to calculate the taxable value for the county, and then everyone sets their budgets based on those taxable value numbers.
How many budgets are there in a county?
A lot.
Yeah.
Like your county assessor, one has their own budget, which is very small in relation to like the rest of the county.
Okay.
The county will have a general fund. The city will have a budget. Your school board has a budget, which probably is the largest budget in your jurisdiction. And then there's several other minor, smaller levies. Usually when you get your property tax statement, which doesn't come from the assessor office, it'll have a list of those levies and everyone who's levying property taxes against your property.
Okay, so let's go back. You mentioned, so on April 1st, the revaluation notices will be sent out
Correct.
to property owners. And then there's a protest period. How does that work?
Well, when you get your assessment notice on or around April 1st, some jurisdictions have actually sent theirs out already early.
Really?
So assessors can send them out early, but they're required by law to send it out by April 1st.
Okay.
So when you get that assessment notice, there'll be instructions on the notice on how to protest your valuation. Basically, you're going to have two avenues at this point in time, right after you get your notice. One is an informal assessment review. That's when you actually call the assessor and you ask the assessor's office to review their own value. This is really good for things that, like, there's a mistake in your assessment, like they have your basement finished and it's not finished, or they have too many bathrooms and you don't have that many. That's a real good idea to do the informal process. Also, you just bought your home for less than it was assessed for, or you have a current purchase contract, or it's listed for less than the new valuation, things of that nature. And then you have a second option, which is the formal board of review, and that's where there's an independent board. Usually it's 3 to 5 members, and they're independent from the assessor office, and they review the assessor's valuations, and they have the ability to change them. And that they usually have hearings occurring during the month of May.
So the month of April, they can do the informal hearing, and
Yes.
then in May, it'll be the formal hearing with the Board of Review.
Yep, they can do both. The date for the informal hearing, you have to file one by April 25th, and you also have to file a protest by April 30th to have a hearing or have the Board of Review review your property during the month of May.
If you've done the informal hearing, you've talked to your county assessor, and you're not satisfied with the results of that, and you do file a petition to do a formal hearing with the Board of Review, how does that work? Walk through that.
Well, you can if you have the conversation with your assessor and you agree to disagree, you can go right to the board review and have the independent board review your information. Typically, what they're looking for is for you to present some kind of information that shows that your property is not worth, what it's assessed for. So a recent appraisal, maybe the house across the street from you sold. It's just a good idea to come in with some kind of information as opposed to just, fill out the form and say that the increase is too much or property taxes are too high. Because they really are. When you go to the, it's an independent board, so they don't know about the conversation that you had with your assessor before, and they don't always know, how your individual assessment was arrived at. It's really your time to explain to the board why your property shouldn't be assessed, for that much.
Brian, if I open up my revaluation notice and my property valuation's gone up 30%, does that mean my property taxes are going to go up 30%?
Well, not necessarily, although we don't know exactly what property taxes are going to go up. Chances are no, because like we explained earlier, you have that rollback. So you have that assessment limitation in process for residential property. So if I'm a residential property owner and I get my assessment notice and it goes up substantially, it's probably not as bad as it looks, because you're not going to pay on the same percentage as you did before. Now, with that said, other classes of property, like commercial and industrial property, they don't get the assessment limitation. They only get the rollback on the first $150,000 of their property valuation. So depending on the size of the commercial property, smaller commercial properties are going to be affected a lot less by the increase than larger ones, because of they're only getting the rollback on the first $150,000 of their assessed value. So there's no longer an assessment limitation. There was until the year 2013, and the legislature got rid of it for the commercial and industrial property, and they replaced it with the business property tax credit, which you used to have to sign up for. And then they changed that to where there's no sign up required. So everybody gets a business property tax credit, which means you'll get the rollback on the first $150,000 of valuation on your property.
Really, we don't learn how much our property values affected our property taxes till our tax statement comes out in, was it like August, I think?
It's actually 18 months behind the assessed value date. So there's a lot of things that go into it before you know what your actual property tax bill is going to be, because it's an 18-month period. The people who levy the taxes and actually spend the property tax money, they won't even begin to develop their budgets until January following the assessments. And then in August, the actual tax bills come out. So it's an 18-month period. So now there's no way to determine what your exact property tax amount would be based on a new assessment, because we don't know what the rollback is going to be. It hasn't been calculated yet, and we don't know what the tax levy is going to be yet.
So as a property owner, when we get that notice, we're just concerned with, does that valuation line up with the current market value of my home, my property, as it is today, or it was on January 1st. Brian, if a property owner needs more help figuring out maybe what their market value is, what are some resources they could use?
Well, I think probably a good place to start is probably your assessor's webpage. A lot of times assessors will have a lot of information on their webpage, whether it be lists of sales, maybe sales map, or like a lot of the counties will have an actual comparable search. So you can actually search for comparable sales for your actual home. And also probably calling the assessor office. If you have a question about a listing, most assessing jurisdictions will have an inventory of what they have characteristic-wise for your house. Look at that, go over that with your assessor, make sure everything is correct. And from there, they should be able to help you. Or a lot of the websites have information where you can actually help yourself. It might be just a compiled list of sales information and properties that sold. But ultimately, you're an expert in your home too. So if you know properties in your neighborhood that sold, kind of look at those and compare them to yours and see how that looks to you.
Well, Brian, this has been great information. I think as a property owner, I know more about what I can do and how the assessor's departments work. I think a lot of people may not understand that they're actually the state guides pretty much how it's done.
They pretty much do, yeah. Assessors are pretty much dictated, to do what is mandated by state law. So mean, people don't like those large increases, but in the vast majority, the assessor's just following the law. They're just doing their law, their job as it's laid out by Iowa code.
My experience with different assessors departments in the counties that I work in, they've all been really pleasant. And it seems to me that most assessors just really all they want is accurate information, and they're very helpful. I know I live in Warren County, and I've dealt with our county assessor several times, and it's easy and pleasant, and they just want to help.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you having me because, I'm working in several assessing jurisdictions currently, and they're all in the same boat. They're all kind of facing these large increases, and I think, anything we can do to get the word out, it's important, that people understand the process, and, understanding that just because your assessment has a large increase, that may not, necessarily equate to a large tax increase.
Well, thank you, Brian. We really appreciate you being here.
Yep. Thank you, John.